Magandang araw, Podmates! My name is Howie Severino, and welcome to the podcast where you rediscover the pleasure of a long attention span. Our guest today restores grand buildings, among them the Rizal Memorial Coliseum and the Metropolitan Theater in Manila. He's an architect, heritage advocate, and professor, and he makes cool documentaries about architecture. May sarili itong YouTube channel, ang Lico. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest, architect Gerard Lico. Magandang araw sa iyo, Architect Lico.
Magandang araw, Howie. It's my pleasure to be here.
You know, much of your work, your research, your documentaries, and you wrote a book also, focused on modern Filipino architecture, and in particular, yung architecture and design noong panahon ng bagong lipunan ni dating Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Sr., which of course is resonating again today because the new president is Ferdinand Marcos Jr., and his mother Imelda was the patroness of the arts back in when her husband was president, and she took charge of the building of many structures, and of course yung kanilang crown jewel, yung Cultural Center of the Philippines. You wrote a book, the Edifice Complex, that I want to ask you about kasi nga may bago tayong Marcos regime ngayon, and so it might be interesting to revisit the architecture and design from those years. But you were quite critical, of this building boom during the Marcos regime in the 70s and 80s. First, that title, a play on Edifice Complex. Oedipus Complex, yung Freudian concept in psychology, ginawa mong Edifice Complex. Edifice, of course, is building, structure, So parang ang dating parang disorder, It's kind of a disorder, psychological condition. So who thought of this clever title, yung Edifice Complex, na derived from Oedipus Complex? It wasn't the first time it was used, right?
I borrowed it from an author from the United States, but I defined it as a syndrome, which plagues an individual or nation or a corporate institution, with a compulsion to build a monumental structure as a mark of power, So because I recognize that architecture is an instant propaganda, and the Marcos regime employed it to the fullest, So at hindi lang hindi lang through the building, at kailangan sustain dito ideologically, Kaya kung mapapansin natin, the buildings were nurtured by the idea of the bahay kubo. Bakit? Kasi merong attempts yung Marcos regime to create a vernacular renaissance, 'Di ba? Isang bansa, isang diwa, one nation, one soul, that we came from a singular race, Kaya makikita natin the barangay was revived, and barangganic social order, was one of the grassroots democratic order, So ano yung mga manifestations nito, for example, Luksin, he abstracted. Makikita natin meron din kasing claim to modernity, modern progress, yung regime. And to do that, you must use the most technologically innovative material and systems, of the time. So concrete, was the material of choice, and Luksin cleverly distilled, the essence of the bahay kubo, through the buildings at the CCP. Nakakita natin merong isang malaking volume, rectangular volume that it seems to float, It alludes to
yung cultural center, center.
Yeah, the cultural center.
Parang isang blocking semento, di ba?
Yeah,
malaking blocking semento.
Yeah, the cultural center, the folk arts theater, the PICC. These are the parang staple, parang merong essential elements doon na floating volume, which is for me derived from the volumetric buoyancy, yung pagiging visual light lightness, no, ng
Okay,
bahay
ibig sabihin
kubo.
lang,
Kasi diba, nakaangat yung
i-translate
bahay
lang natin
kubo,
to.
no?
I-translate lang natin to, Gerard. No? So ano yung pagkabahay kubo doon sa CCP halimbawa? Kasi that's the most familiar. Nakikita yan ng lahat ng dumadaan sa Rojas Boulevard, no, sa Maynila, no.
Kasi yung sa CCP, oo. Kasi meron kang isang mabigat na ano, no, na rectangular volume. Pero mabigat siya, pero it looks light, no, because it used cantilever, no? Para siyang ano, nakasuspend on air, no? In the similar way that yung isang bahay kubo, 'di ba, box din siya, no? Box architecture siya, pero nakasuspend siya in air sa pamamagitan ng mga stilts, no? So, yung prinsipyo na 'yon, no? Na-translate, na-transcode sa reinforced concrete, no? So, the visual lightness, although gawa siya sa konkreto, pero it is visually light. Medyo paradoxical nga yung yung style ni ni Locsin, no? Light yet massive yung kanyang mga volumes, no? So, going back, talagang the Marcos regime sought to create a unitary image for Filipino architecture. Talagang they were conscious of creating a singular style, manifested in the works of Locsin, but later on they shifted to a more vernacular, na yung ibig sabihin natin vernacular, talagang instantly alam mo na bahay kubo, ito yung aesthetics ni Manyosa. So nag-shift doon paparating sa 1980s. Talagang kawayan, talagang
sama na dyan yung Coconut Palace, no?
Yeah, yung Coconut Palace, kasi Imelda Marcos wanted to make to reinvent the coconut tree as the tree of life, so they got funding from a grant to develop coconut as a building material, and the product of this experimentation was actually the Coconut Palace or the Tahanang Pilipino. But notice that all of this architecture during this period were produced with a generous resources by the government, na talagang they spend a lot in terms of creating architecture and identifiable and iconic, I say iconic because instantly you can identify this building kahit nga, di ba, kahit nga ngayon, if I ask you, after the Marcos regime, are there any iconic buildings that was produced afterwards? None, di ba? Kasi nga talagang aral na aral yung aesthetics na to. Talagang to give a sense of nationhood, because buildings, how can you love a nation? Especially a nation na especially the leader, he seized power, kailangan ng legitimation. So, how can you love a nation, kung hindi mo siya nakikita, So, the concept of nation is invisible. It's an abstraction. But you have to have something tangible, to cling this para mag-manifest itong imagination na to. And architecture is one of the best tool, to accomplish that. So that's why napakaraming building spree, from di ba nga, from womb to tomb, infrastructure were developed by Imelda, from housing to cultural center to designer hospitals, it was produced, even cultural theme parks, like Nayong Pilipino, it was very systematic.
So tingin mo itong pandemic will have a lasting effect on design and architecture?
Of course. So because of yung, di ba, itong pandemic, we become neurotic, neurotic about hygiene, spray ng alcohol, but the principles, in terms of architecture was already there, in the early 20th century, that we should reintroduce yung well ventilated spaces, yung yung exposure sa sunlight. Talagang kailangan ibalik yung mga prinsipyo na to, kasi alam mo ba na ang modern architecture was born out of medicalization of space, no? Even yung tuberculosis, no? Yung the birth of modern hospital, no? Modernity was a consequence, no, of tuberculosis, no? Yung mga sanitarium na yan, no? Na maganda pag-aralan kasi applicable pa rin siya sa ano, no, sa age natin, especially in a post-pandemic, no, context.
Hi, I'm Howie Severino. Check out the Howie Severino Podcast, an original for GMA News and Public Affairs. New episodes will stream every Thursday. Listen for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other platforms.